This is something, in my opinion, that has never been done before and demonstrated as it relates to a real partnership in all of the entities that touch our entire drainage system and roles and responsibilities associated. I want to acknowledge and thank Mr. Ramsey Green, who is my Deputy CAO of Infrastructure, Mr. Ghassan Corbin, who is our Director of the Sewerage and Water Board of New Orleans, and Colonel Stephen Murphy with the Army Corps of Engineers. Really appreciate their presence and again, drainage our entire system in the city of New Orleans. We are owning our responsibilities and seamlessly working together. Our infrastructure and drainage system is a shared responsibility. We're not being reactive because we're doing the work every single day and have been doing it since I've been in office for a year and over 3 months now. Infrastructure has been a top priority for me in my capacity as a community leader on the New Orleans City Council, but more importantly, as the mayor of the city of New Orleans. You know, like me, coming in office, 2 weeks in, we had a major flooding event. We made sure that we pushed in, leaned forward to address issues relative to flooding, infrastructure, drainage, you name it, in the city. We've talked and addressed pumps and power and focusing on the Joint Infrastructure and Roads program that you all know about. When we got here, 1% of those dollars were actually spent. But I am happy to say in a year's time that this administration has moved forward to 5% of those dollars. We're not there yet, but we're working diligently on it. Even stepped up as it relates to our Fair Share initiative that really started relative to the Sewerage and Water Board being on the brinks of having no money. And when I made this point and brought this forth not only to the public but to leadership, I was told that I was making idle threats about the existing conditions that we're faced with the Sewerage and Water Board. But moving that along and working with our local delegation, that the city of New Orleans was able to make good on our efforts relative to our legislative agenda, putting forth $50 million in one-time money for the Sewerage and Water Board, in addition to $27 million recurring that we are working on right now that are tied to ballot initiatives that we will see this November. But we were told it couldn't happen. But again, doing the work, we're getting results. People are really trying to find a single bad actor as it relates to our entire drainage system. And there's no one, I would say, single to blame. Having to blame something or someone for what we're experiencing in our city, and particularly what we have been seeing. The goal of today is simply to explain to residents the true situation of what we're faced with, and with facts. And being honest about things that we don't know, but even as we're continuing to do the work to determine issues that we need to deal with, and also the resources that are necessary to address these issues holistically as it relates to the entire system. Inescapable realities absolutely are the change in weather patterns that we're seeing. And you can see them. We've been experiencing these rainfalls. New Orleans is the third rainiest city in the country. Half of our land lies, as you know, below sea level. Nearly all of our city is surrounded by walls and levees, which means every single drop of rain that is not absorbed into the ground must be mechanically pumped up and out of our city, sometimes multiple times. So for example, a drop of rainfall that comes on to, say, Decatur Street, for example, in the French Quarter, has to make its way through over 6 miles of pipes, culverts, canals, in addition to being pumped up at least twice before it reaches its final destination in Lake Pontchartrain. Subsidence, again, is real for our city. And, as I mentioned, unquestionably experiencing more intense rainfall events as a symptom of changing weather patterns. Again, this is a reality. Experts predict that this problem will only get worse if we don't do something about it. So we're going to talk through many things with you this afternoon, but I want you to know that leadership in this city, who are standing with me side by side, that we are committed, and we've already demonstrated real results and action steps that we're taking as a city and as partners. We cannot fix it all on our own. So with that, we're doing our part. But know that the public also plays a real role and has a responsibility in this as well. Action has been put in place, but we're asking the public again to do their part, leaning on in, listening, needing to educate themselves and have a greater understanding of our existing conditions. This also speaks to cleaning up our city. Trash throughout the city that ends up in our drains and drainage canals, that is way beyond just a piece of paper. And we've also showed what we've been pulling out of canals. But you can go around the city of New Orleans and you can see dumping going on. Just the other day, someone dumped 3 boats on Martin Luther King Avenue. You can't make it up. It's present. It's there. So I am asking that as residents of the city of New Orleans, that again, we be responsible and pick up our trash and dump it appropriately so that again, it doesn't end up in our drains and therefore causing just the need for additional resources that this city has to put forth to mitigate the issues that follow. We're being proactive every step of the way, but it does cost money, expertise, of course, and time. This is why in November we have ballot initiatives put forth. I spoke a little bit about this in my opening comments. The short-term rental ballot initiative that's there, November, is again tied to the recurring revenue, the $27 million that we are trying to get for infrastructure improvements with the Sewerage and Water Board. The city has never had a dedicated maintenance fund. This also speaks to asking the public to approve a rededication of 3 mills to maintenance in our city. Infrastructure is just that vital and important. The rededication of these mills, along with $500 million approval for us to sell bonds. Again, investing those dollars immediately into infrastructure in the city of New Orleans. These issues, again, cannot be fixed without all of us. And so you're going to hear from our partners, both internal and external, to take a deeper dive in what we know and what we also know needs to be done about it. So I'm going to start by inviting Ramsey Green to the podium to walk through his presentation with you. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And for those of you who are in the room, you've got a bit of a PowerPoint that looks kind of like that. I'll walk through that a little bit. It's got some imagery and some information I think it's really important to convey. First and foremost, I want to echo what the Mayor's been saying, and there's an important scientific component that we have to acknowledge. We're experiencing more intense and more frequent rates of rain, and that's the reality we're facing. But I also want to reassure everyone that we're taking this incredibly seriously. The folks in the infrastructure components of the city's protection and management think about this every day, and Mayor Cantrell has thought about this every day, and our teams have been working on this to improve how things operate and getting more resources to the table, which the fair share funds are a critical part of, and you're going to see how we're putting some of that work, that money to work. Everyone's standing here, the city, the Sewage and Water Board, and the Army Corps of Engineers and the SELA team are committed to working together, and that's a big part of why we're standing here today. The Timer team is looking at the city's drainage system, comprehensive in a way that's pretty innovative, and it's a big deal. We don't have all the answers, but we know given what happened last Monday, and given July 10th, Mother's Day, et cetera, that it's important that we all stand up here and show the public, give you all a kind of a seminar, a bit of an education on how some of these things work, but also to articulate that we are working really well together. And a really important component of this that personally I don't know that we talk enough about is green infrastructure, and that's what we're going to talk a bit about shortly. If you are here again, go to the first slide. We talk about infrastructure challenges. The Department of Public Works system is made up of about 72,000 catch basins, 1,500 miles of pipes under 36 inches in diameter, 48,000 drainage manholes. This is a big system, but it's a part of the overarching system that's represented behind this podium today. And the folks out there doing this work every day. If you go to the next slide, and the mayor alluded to this, but I think it's statistically really crucial. When Mayor Cantrell came into office on May 7th of 2018, there were a lot of folks who've asked, where's the FEMA money? How's it getting spent? In July of 2016, the city of New Orleans was awarded 2 FEMA project worksheets, one of roughly 1.3 and one roughly $300 million. And that is the surface and the subsurface infrastructure related to Katrina damages. That funding, as the mayor said, less than 1% of it had been spent. We've ramped up spending, and we've put roughly $100 million into work since we came into office. That gets us to about 5-6%. We're not where we want to be, but we're on the pace. Thanks to the leadership of Keith LaGrange at DPW, Bob Turner at Sewage and Water Board, and Joe Threat running the project delivery unit for the city. We are now, you're seeing road work, particularly close to the less historic parts of the city, closer to the lake. You have 9 projects worth about $25 million done now, 12 projects under construction worth about $80 million. We've been trying to do a lot of groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings to show that work to the public. And we're kicking off construction on 6 road projects worth about $40 million in the next 90 days, and there is critical sewage and water board components to that work. We have another 14 projects going into advertising within the next 30 days as well. Also, and I think this is a big part of green infrastructure, it obviously is, we have about $141 million in HUD funds, that was the National Disaster Resilience Competition funds, and about $150 million in hazard mitigation grant funds. Getting that funds to move is a huge victory of this administration. For example, the hazard mitigation grant funds. That's about 9 to 10 projects. When we came in the door, I think we had 1 truly approved by FEMA, getting us the cost-benefit analysis of every dollar that goes into the work has to have $1 or more in benefit coming back. We're now, we've reached all project thresholds. FEMA's approved those projects, and you're seeing that work going. Hagen-Lafitte is a perfect example of that. You can see some imagery on that. In addition, Mirabu is a good example of that, and we also have completed Cherokee Street in Uptown is a good example. You can see some parking, pervious concrete, and the fill that goes with it in a very sophisticated way. The water moves, but we have a lot of good projects to show. Just a couple examples, DPS 1 project, that just achieved a 100% design where we're putting water holding under all the Nord parks in the Uptown watershed. That's going to hold about 13 million gallons of stormwater in a 10-year flood event. We just got approved in City Park, a project to hold 49 million gallons of stormwater in a 10-year flood event. Getting that water held so it doesn't go into the drainage system in one of these very high rate of rain events is critical to alleviating the pressure, reducing street flooding, keeping floodwaters from impacting our cars, our streets, our infrastructure as well. If you go to the next page, page 4, you can see an image of the Hagen-Lafitte project. That is a photo of Easton Park in Mid-City. A lot of folks know that area. August 5th, 2017, that area flooded. We just put sod on top of Easton Park. And you can see the work that went in there is you can't see much because it looks like a park. Underneath the park is a huge cistern, freight train sized cars holding water before they go into the St. Louis Canal. It's really important that we allow nature and using the elements of holding water as a future for infrastructure in this city, because we cannot pump our way out of this problem. Even if we have all of our pumps functioning at the optimal level, even if we have all of our canals and our drain lines, our drain infrastructure operating at the optimal level, we still need to hold water before it goes into the drainage system. If you look on page 5, that's an example of the South Galvez Street Green Infrastructure Project. That was recently completed. That's a combination of federal funds from both the Housing and Urban Development Department as well as FEMA. And our in-house team at DPW really figured out a way to layer federal funds to get that to be a true complete street. We talk a lot about cycling lanes, pervious concrete. Pervious concrete is not at a point where you can really drive on it, but you can certainly park on it. And that material selection is a really important component of the work we're doing. If you look on page 6, that's Cherokee Street, uptown. A lot of folks used to call Cherokee Street Lake Cherokee at times, and we're seeing a dramatic decrease in the amount of flooding as a result of introducing green infrastructure elements to our road projects. If we go to page 7, I'm going to be very high level about this. A lot of folks have asked, in particular, we have all these catch basins, we see clogs, we see breaks, etc. The mayor's victory on fair share is an unprecedented public safety measure and economic development boon to this city. To make it so you can clean catch basins and the parallel lateral lines at a rate that has not been done. One cleaning to every 2 to 3 years. And the Department of Public Works, led by Keith LaGrange and Josh Hartley, and some of our folks have really put a lot of work into determining how that money can be spent most efficiently. You can see sort of just some of the very specific examples there, but fair share will double the size of the Department of Public Works maintenance staff by 2022. That's 42 additional employees. It's going to cut response times on 311 calls by 50%. When somebody calls about a clogged storm drain, we can also respond to it or get a better sense of how to deal with it within the same week as its complaint coming in. That's a big victory. Additionally, what we're looking at, if we get we got it, thank God. The fair share funds. We're also looking at, there's a list there on page 8 about all of the vehicles and the fleet that we need to purchase so our DPW maintenance folks have the equipment they need to do the hard work that they're doing on a day-to-day basis, which includes ditching, alley work. We hear from a lot of our residents in Lakeview that alleys are a major problem. From our residents in both Lakeview and the West Bank, that ditches are a huge component of our drainage system. We need to use the assets that we have and get our existing drainage infrastructure up to a point that that it operates the way it should, so we can really hold water in our green infrastructure places effectively. If you look at page 9, by 2021, our goal is to have 12 vac trucks operating. We haven't had that. That's 2 trucks per council district, plus a floating crew, as well as responding to potholes, which are a huge problem to all urban environments. Unusually, to New Orleans, we have a subsidence problem. And subsidence is one of those things where we are really looking into. We have some analytics coming out of some of the best minds on the question of subsidence. But subsidence impacts our sidewalks, our streets, our infrastructure projects, the Joint Infrastructure Program, getting that roughly $2 billion into the streets and into functioning really well. But subsidence is a big thing, and it's something that uniquely faces New Orleans. The last thing I want to focus on page 10 of that presentation, you have a still, and I think this is important. It's a JPEG. I think it's important to point out that after Mother's Day, the mayor was in our EOC, and we are looking at real-time crime center footage of where the flooding is happening, and the mayor says, we need to find out why. And that press release came out well before July 10th, well before August 26th, showing what areas are we seeing standing water. And our DPW team, and Hassan and Bob's teams, have been looking at what is happening underneath the streets. And you're going to hear more about that from the Sewage and Water Board side. But we also, from each one of these rain events, we learned something. On August 26th, if you look at slide 11, we have another 9 locations that as of Monday last week at 6:30 p.m., there was still ponding water in those locations. And our teams are looking at them and saying, okay, what is happening at these particular locations that we aren't aware of at this particular moment in time? And finally, Keith and the Department of Public Works crew, they're doing a huge amount of analysis involving CCTV, cleaning catch basins, main lines, and using models to figure out what are the impacts of some of our aging infrastructure. When you have a 10-inch drain line attached to a bigger drain, 10 inches was built 100 years ago, perhaps when we didn't have as much concrete, when we didn't have as much development in this city. We have a very historic city, and we have very modern environmental problems that we're facing, and we are committed to resolving and solving those problems as we move forward. Finally, the last two slides show you that the climate adaptation strategy of the city of New Orleans has not changed. When that resilience strategy came out, what we really were looking at in the resilience side of city government was how do we do this more effectively? What are the challenges we're facing? Everything from cycling, complete streets, ensuring that equity exists as we build a better and a more resilient city, because these issues are facing places all over the world. I really think about Charleston, South Carolina in particular right now, as Hurricane Dorian is in that region. Charleston is a similar city to us in terms of age, and they're seeing unprecedented flooding at the southern end of the Battery of Charleston. And we as cities are focused on making these things better given the resources that we have and bringing those resources to the fore. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. And we're taking the time that's necessary to thoroughly explain as best we can, again, the existing conditions of our city. It warrants the time that we are taking, and I'm going to ask Mr. Ghassan Corbin of the Sewerage and Water Board to come up next with his presentation. Ghassan?
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. There's a reason we're standing united this afternoon, and that's vastly because the mayor has demanded partnership and fostered partnership. And I cannot think of an issue other than the drainage issue that we face as a community in this city that demands partnership more than anything else. And the mayor has demanded that we collectively own this, and she said this repeatedly. Time is now. We are standing in a pivotal time, facing an enormous and daunting and costly issue as a community. And it's going to take all of us, including you, including our residents, to do their part to move this city forward and improving the quality of life of our city. I'd like to take some time to talk about what we've done maybe the past year or so in terms of accomplishments, and I have to recognize the General Superintendent, Bob Turner, who, without him, I don't know if I can do my job, and he's really rose the caliber and the standard by which we operate on a daily basis and improving the way we deliver services to our residents and our customers, so I have to recognize him publicly for that. So last year, we've spent a lot of time improving our pumping and power capacity, and you've heard me say this repeatedly at many events. Our pumps are virtually all available except for one. So we have 98 of our 99 drainage pumps that are available. They're working. So during an event, any of them could be turned on and do its purpose. This is a situation that couldn't be said a couple of years ago. So there's been a very, very concerted effort that was put toward that, allowing us to be able to say that. And more importantly is the power generation that we rely on so crucially during events. And we are able today to produce more power than any peak need at any given event. That's a very stable place to be. But it's also a very concerning situation because we have a very vulnerable infrastructure. And that's why we have pivoted our attention to the unforeseen, the invisible infrastructure. And we've been looking down and underground to look at the Sewage and Water Board's facilities and at our canals and large pipes. And because the task is so daunting, we sometimes are reactive, sometimes we are preemptive and proactive, but at times you watch what happens during an event, and as some of you may have seen, there was some overtopping at the Lafitte Canal, which caused us to spend some time and paid attention to that canal. We looked into it, we've outsourced the inspection of that, and to no surprise, we found large objects and lots of debris, one of which was a car. And since then, we've cleaned about 500 tons of debris out of that canal. And you think that's an accomplishment, which it is in a way, but there remains about 20,000 tons left in there. That requires so much money that now we wait to see how we can prioritize our funding and available money so we can get rid of that 20,000 tons. But I assure you what we did is we removed all the high piles and the large objects, leaving about 2 feet worth of sediment, which we know and we recognize it does diminish the capacity of those canals, but the impact is not as great as having these large piles remain there. So it's somewhat of a staple. We're not losing sight of the fact that we need to go back and take every single ton of debris out of there to maximize the capacity and return the canal to its original design capacity. As some of you know, we had a flood event about a week or so ago in downtown, and many people are frustrated, are confused about why is all of a sudden downtown is flooding. Some people blame uptown projects and CEDA projects to that, and I can assure you that there is no connection between the two. They're two different watersheds, and one does not contribute or attribute to the other one. But we don't take this very lightly. Similar to what we did at Lafitte, as we speak, we are underneath a lot of canals in downtown, whether it's Julia, whether it's Basin Street, Canal Street. We are looking to see what, if any, impediments exist in those canals. Our early indications that we're finding little, which is a good sign. Nonetheless, we have to lay our eyes on these so we can with certainty tell you whether there's a problem that to be addressed or there's not a problem, so we can move on and focus on another infrastructure that belongs to the Sewage and Water Board. Again, this is a very, very daunting and expensive endeavor. We take it one day at a time on your behalf, and I know the mayor talked about fair share, so did Ramsey, and I have to assure you that that was a crucial occurrence. It kept us alive, it allowed us to survive. We would have gone bankrupt, so as we receive that money, we're paying off all debt, and it's allowing us to focus on continuing our mission of diverting from generating power using steam, which is very costly and ineffective, to making or purchasing electricity from energy, which is much more viable option as we stand today. While that money allows us to make better decisions moving forward, is a drop in the bucket in terms of what our needs are going to be. And the only way I can tell you what it's going to cost to move this utility forward and become a model utility is to do a master plan, which I've been advocating for. So to basically touch every single piece of infrastructure we have, quantify the costs associated with it, talk to our community about the level of service that they demand from us. Is the status quo acceptable? I would argue not. And what does that mean in terms of cost implications to improve the level of service that our community can and should demand? So as we start that effort, we're going to come back to you and talk to you as we devise and develop that plan, so you own what expectations and what level of service you demand from us. And lastly, we're assessing the CEDA projects from the Sewage and Water Board perspective. We're getting great partnership and collaboration from the core in terms of availing information that we need to provide you with a very thorough and complete and accurate assessment as to whether CEDA is actually helping, is it hurting, which some segment of the community believe that it is, and we have hired a third-party consultant to make that assessment, and that determination we're going to share with you publicly, and whatever the outcome is, we're going to share it with you, and we suspect that the CEDA projects are helping. But we would prove that through a third-party analysis, and that's imminent. We're hoping to share that with you within 2 to 3 weeks. With that, I'm very proud to be standing next to you, Mayor,
Thank you.
managing this very, very daunting issue.
Thank you so much. And Ghassan spoke about and we'll hear more from Colonel Murphy regarding the SEALA projects. But one of the things that has been a great benefit to the city is the investment by the federal government in an urban environment that is because of the repetitive loss that this city has seen over decades. And we have to recognize that investment, and also as it relates to the impacts, positive impacts that it's had on our city. You will hear more from Colonel Murphy at this time, who again is with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Be here today in partnership with the mayor and the team. Really glad to know this is not the first time we've met. This actually represents just one of many occasions, probably the most public, where we are in close coordination and partnership. As you well know, the city faces a triple threat from flooding. The Corps is primarily focused on flood risk management, and so internal drainage is not a normal Corps issue. But with SEALA, in conjunction with the Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction System, what you see, just what the mayor spoke about, is a significant investment by the federal government in New Orleans and in protecting it from flood. And again, the whole group has said this is truly a team effort. This is not something that the Corps of Engineers can fix alone with SEALA. This takes everybody involved in working closely together. And just if you look at the big picture, so there's been a significant federal investment in the city of New Orleans through the Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction System. So $14.6 billion since Katrina in 2005. What you might not know is part of that $14.5 billion is that $1.5 billion is going towards SEALA to assist with New Orleans internal drainage. And that's very unique. There's 43 districts in the Corps of Engineers. New Orleans is one of the largest ones. We are the only one with a large internal drainage issue like this. So to me, this is a good news story, and just like the mayor said, that there is a significant federal investment with state and local level to help solve this issue. Right now, what we have specifically in Orleans Parish is a $1.1 billion investment, which when it's completed in 2021, will improve 16 major drainage lines, add pump capacity to 2 pump stations, and construct 2 new pump stations. And currently we have 18 out of the 20 construction contracts awarded are currently complete. And additionally, when we finish Orleans, we'll be moving, well, we have Florida Avenue right now, and when we finish that one in 2021, we'll be moving to Algiers. So this, like I said, is a very big deal. The Corps is happy to be in partnership with the city to reduce risk. And I'll just make a note on the weather. I am no weatherman, but I will tell you what the Corps of Engineers in the New Orleans district has seen. So the district just came out of the longest flood fight in its 200-year history. It was the highest river of 9.5 months. 5.5 of those months were at 24/7 operations, so that's 1 in 4 people in my district is walking levees, working with local levee districts, just a significant effort. So high river means extremely saturated soils. Another study I saw said that in the last 25 years, the soils are more saturated than we've ever seen them in this region. So what that means is, just like the mayor said, any drop of water right now, the majority of them goes into the drainage system. So what I'd like to tell you about SEALA is authorized in 1996 by Congress, but what the Corps is seeing is performing as designed. But I'd leave you with several key takeaways. First of all, SEALA, the design, the contracting, construction had very much been a partnering effort with the city and in conjunction with the city's master plan. So this is not the Corps of Engineers coming in and telling the city, here's how we'll fix you. This is very much a partnership where we are hand in glove with the city for every single one of these projects. I will also tell you, SELA is just a small but very visible portion of the overall drainage challenge that New Orleans faces. Significant impact to locals to provide that underground storage, and that's what it is. It is significant underground storage to get that water off the streets, underground, until the pumps can catch up and actually pump it out of the city and into Lake Pontchartrain. But that is the challenge. This is a system of systems. There's miles and miles of drainage lines, culverts, pumps. I mean, they talk to the challenge of electric. SELA is a very small portion. Thank you, Mayor.
What's in red represents the SELA projects. This is the city of New Orleans. So when you look at the blue, green, that is our system as a whole. So in no way we can expect one portion of the system, which has been improved by SELA, to keep this entire city from flooding. It's a small portion, very impactful, very meaningful. But what this speaks to is inadequate drainage in the city of New Orleans, over 100-year-old system, as you all know, and the system can't work effectively when there's so much work to be done within the system. So, highlighting again the areas here of the SELA projects that Colonel Murphy is speaking about, and they are in red.
So thank you, Mayor. So in conjunction with the city, they are designed to a 10-year storm criteria, which basically means to handle up to 9 inches of water over a 24-hour period. But it's getting that 9 inches of water off the street into the SELA system that is the challenge. It has doubled the storage capacity in the area where it's complete, and it has been effective from what we're seeing. We are standing with the city and providing over-the-shoulder review of the report, the comprehensive review of the system right now, to provide analysis with our modeling, with all the data that we have in the core. But again, we're here in partnership with the mayor and her team. So I have my senior project manager, who's actually worked on the SELA project here for the last 13 years, Mr. Joey Wagner, with me. So when this comes to an end and we open up for questions, we will be able to answer any more detailed questions you might have. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Colonel. And so what we're wanting to do now is pretty much take questions, and that will allow for us together to kind of speak to what's on your, what's in your mind about existing conditions and what's just been reported. Ms. LaToya?
David Campbell with WWL.
Mayor, Mr. Corbin just said that there needs to be an assessment, a master plan for a big overhaul of the project, and he said that we need to look at a drainage fee for that. Is there a plan to have a drainage fee put on the ballot for voters to approve to get a separate stream of money for drainage improvement?
Well, we are not, overlooking any opportunities to improve our existing conditions. What we do know is that we are inadequately funded, meaning there is a huge gap, and still doing the analysis to determine what that gap really is, but we know that it's in the billions. It's a reality. So I'm not leaving anything off of the table. Everything that we've done is taking a step in the right direction, and we're taking a step at a time. So as we take the step with showing how we're using the one-time and the recurring money and making sure that it is being invested in infrastructure, we'll be able to show that, hopefully building momentum with the public, building that trust so that they know, hey, we're doing exactly what we said that we would do based on the needs of our city. So my answer is we're going to take those steps at the appropriate time, and it will be through the studies, the analyses that we are conducting right now, even as it relates to nonprofits, for example. That's been another issue that's come up. nonprofit community paying its fair share relative to infrastructure improvements. And so we are taking that study up right now because you have to make sure that there's a balanced approach with that. For example, we have nonprofits that are doing work that the government isn't doing, so that we're benefiting holistically from it. But then at the same time, they're contributing, some are contributing to the burdens, right? Added people using our infrastructure. That can speak to our universities, that can speak to, I know that we talked about even our faith-based community, but it goes further than that. And we just want to be fair in our approach, and it's not a cookie cutter approach. So we're going to take the time necessary to do the analysis, to come back to the public, and have a plan in place to move forward with getting additional resources that will improve our infrastructure. And that also includes a stormwater fee. Also, we are looking at, internally, we're looking at removing some of the ambiguity relative to the city council maybe having the authority to move forward with voting on such a stormwater fee. But we know that we want to clear up language at the state level so that there's no ambiguity in that, and we clearly understand, is it something that the city council will allow them to do, or does this need to go to a vote of the people? I'm looking at all of these things, but we're wanting to be very intentional about the steps that we are taking, and I'm hoping that I've demonstrated that since I've been your mayor, and every step matters, and so we're going to continue to move them along.
Do you have a target time for when that might go to either the council or the voters for a stormwater fee?
Well, right now, let me tell you, Hammer, I'm working, trying to really get our public to understand that we need to have their support on the short-term rental, where visitors will pay their tax associated the same that hotels pay. Short-term rental visitors will pay. So that's not something that the public, meaning our residents will pay, but those will go to visitors. I'm asking for really their consideration of our ability to sell $500 million in bond sales. That again will go towards infrastructure of this city. I'm asking them to look at creating a maintenance fund again, so that we can be more intentional as it relates to not just fleet management, but infrastructure across the board, cybersecurity, you name it. We don't have that, and so we need to understand that while we're standing here, we're under a warning by the federal government, the IG, by saying that the city of New Orleans has a history of not maintaining its facilities, its infrastructure. And so what I do not want to happen is that as a community, as a city, we say, no, we don't want to invest in maintaining the improvements that we see, the billions of dollars of federal money that we've benefited from. So I'm hoping that the public understands that we all have a role to play, and I'm asking for their consideration, because it really will be a tremendous impact to the infrastructure improvements that are already in queue, that I need to get off the ground, get completed. Again, building momentum, showing the public that we're doing what we say that's aligned with the needs of this city. So I hope, and you can go deeper.
Yeah. My understanding is that joint roads program, very little, if any of it, is actually for drainage work as opposed to water and sewer work as it relates to Sewage and Water Board.
Well, and you're exactly right, and that's why we're in need of additional cash flow. This $500 million in bond sales could fill those gaps. As if JIR, which is that joint infrastructure, where it can't do it all, but it allows us to leverage those the bond sales, those dollars generated from the bond sales, to meet the need, to fill that gap, to do more, go beyond just the scope of work or JIRR, and we have to go beyond that because it's not meeting the needs of our entire system, and we know that.
Can you clarify this 1% of funds spent on JIRR and why just 1%?
Okay, sure, we can. And I'm going to ask Ramsey, who's been very deep into this, But it's a combination of issues that we have been able to not only identify as well as address. And this is one, for example, it was taking so long for an archaeological review of the scope of work for these projects. We identified that once we came into office. And an upward of, and Ramsey can speak to this, over 100 plus days, even getting into over a year of these reviews. And we mentioned this, we were able to cite it, and therefore brought this to FEMA, brought it to GOSEP, and we were able to get FEMA to pay for an archaeologist that is now housed inside of city government that works for us, and we've been able to cut down that time, in some instances within 15 days, to get through the process. So that is a small but very meaningful example of how we have just leaned in to cut out red tape. But I'm going to ask Ramsey to give you more of an answer.
It's a really good question. I can't speak to pre-May 7th, 2018. Really, coordination wasn't where you would expect it to be as a resident. You had the Sewage and Water Board doing its thing, Department of Public Works doing its thing, and when you're submitting a design for a street, for the water delivery, water and drainage and sewer beneath it, to the federal government, and it's not precisely done, and everybody doing that submission isn't on the same page, it's not like FEMA's going to be very, oh, okay, we'll approve it even though you guys don't have your ducks in the row. And what we've done is
Get our ducks in a row.
I was going to say align our ducks, but that's just a weird phrase.
Well, someone said we need to get our ducks in a row.
Yeah,
we have our ducks in a row. We have great need in this city. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. We've aligned our ducks, and we, as the mayor said, we looked at procedural things. One was we have a very historic city, and when FEMA pays for something to be done on the infrastructure side, they have to follow every federal National Park Service, it's called EHP, Environmental Historic Preservation Rule. And one thing we did, as the mayor said, we brought in an archaeologist, we brought in a historic preservationist to help us do those reviews more quickly. We also really developed a collaboration of trust between the Sewage and Water Board and DPW project managers, getting those folks to work even side by side in the same location. That was a huge part of it. Additionally, making sure our procurement folks know the needs of the infrastructure program and the deadlines that we really have. And I cannot underestimate the real partnership that the city and Sewage and Water Board have with both FEMA and the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, GOSEP, which is the fiscal agent for all FEMA funds that come to the state of Louisiana. It was a lot of management and process understanding. I'll just give you one example, Bourbon Street Phase 2. Bourbon Street Phase 1, when we came in the door, we learned, this project was long. It closed a huge portion of Bourbon Street down 3-4 blocks at a time, and our folks really worked hard together to say, okay, let's do utility run ahead, half the side of the street, and shut one street and 1 or 2 blocks down at a single time. And it's kind of a much more kinder, gentler Bourbon Street project. I think that's a good corollary for the direction that the Joint Infrastructure Program has been headed.
And we're doing even more. For example, we now own the VA hospital, the old one. And we're building out space right now where we will co-locate PDU for Sewage and Water Board and DPW. Same space. So the coordination is happening. So we're taking this just head on, making no excuses but doing the work that it takes. And I'm seeing more done under our leadership than in a mighty long time.
Jessica Williams, the applicant. Madam Mayor, when you start speaking about stormwater fees and free mill infrastructure taxes, there's a sense that people are feeling taxed out and they're tired of, paying higher taxes in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the work that you're doing to mitigate high property taxes for folks also on the October 12th ballot, how that's going to work, who's going to be eligible. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Now, as it relates to the 3 mills that we've been talking about, this is a reallocation. It's mills that the public has already been paying. And so we're asking for a reallocation of 3 mills that will go towards maintenance, and we need to do that very desperately. As it relates to the constitutional amendment that we're putting forth on the October ballot, That is a statewide, election that we're asking our residents throughout the state of Louisiana to allow the city of New Orleans to have flexibility with our ad valorem taxes so that we can do tax abatement. This is something that will allow for the city of New Orleans to address very heavily on housing infrastructure. And we were able to get this approved at the state level. This was a part of our legislative agenda that our local delegation was able to get passed. We working very hard across all lines, party lines. We got it approved. When we were told we wouldn't be able to do it at the state of Louisiana, you know what, we were able to, because we were able to demonstrate the need locally, and that we want, as a city, to be able to take care of ourselves. And so we need this flexibility. Again, will not impact any other parish in the state of Louisiana, other than giving the city the ability to take care of herself and possibly not having to go to the state, for different things, as we just had to do. And so this flexibility will allow us to do housing abatement that will go towards preserving housing, keeping our people in their homes where they're living instead of feeling like they're being pushed out of their communities, to provide gap financing options again, so that they can make readily repairs to their property. Gap financing that would lead towards soft seconds, first-time homeowner programs. Also to our rental community, we still have a majority of our residents in our city who are renters. We know that, yes, they are cost burden, and that's exactly why this constitutional amendment is so important and vital to the future of this city relative to housing, because the needs are great. We are in a housing crisis. We have 22,000 residents that remain on a waiting list for subsidized housing. But again, this flexibility will give our city the opportunity to create tax abatements for affordable housing that's created along the lines of our neighborhood fabric. Every neighborhood is not the same. Some neighborhoods are absolutely like gentrified. Some are in the process of redevelopment, but on the cusp of being gentrified. And so we can slow that down. We can create some balance through this constitutional amendment.
Yeah, so I think it was like about a year ago, there was a big study about maybe looking into different ways to make DPW and the Sewerage and Water Board work better together. Should they combine or create a new utility, or what are the different ways forward? What's the latest on that, and is that still something you're looking at, or is that just a study that's on a shelf kind of thing now? Like, are you still exploring?
It wasn't our study.
It was I think the state asked for it.
That was Representative Hilferty
Right.
had put together a task force relative to that, and the outcomes really speak to the steps that we're taking right now. That the Sewerage and Water Board is a state utility, locally ran as me being the president of the Sewerage and Water Board, strengthening the infrastructure relative to that, making sure that we are pushing for additional resources to do the infrastructure that's needed, making sure that it continues to have its own bonding capacity. That's a benefit to us. The Department of Public Works, I think it really speaks to the coordination. What came out of that is really that coordination that we have been so really focused on. We can't wait. And we're so serious about it. I kind of gave you examples of even the build out of spaces at the VA, but making sure that when the streets are open, that we're doing everything at one time in coordination, so that the people don't say, oh, DPW's doing this, it comes Sewerage and Water Board.
David Hammer, WWL.
Mr. Wagner, I just wanted to ask you real quick about what can you tell people who live along the Sewa canals and new Sewa culverts who have experienced flooding, more extensive flooding recently with these rainstorms, about what role the culverts play? Is there anything about connections to the old system that they should know about, or that could be causing problems?
Well, first of all, the seal is a storage for a 10-year level event. So the water has to get off the street to our culverts. And that's working. And I'll point back to what the mayor was saying. you know, we have to get active after this. We have to get out there and start cleaning up our own streets. And then once the city comes back behind us, and it's been the plan all along, once we finish, the city is gonna come back behind us and start tying in to the bigger culverts. So over time, you'll start seeing a better improvement. But once again, living in a city, the mayor says, park on a neutral ground. We all know there's certain areas in the city that are gonna flood, and it's gonna continue to flood until the system is totally overhauled.
But speaking to SELA being a small portion, a very, you know, impactful portion of the system, but until the city, you know, we deal with our local issues relative to infrastructure, then we will not see the system working as intended, you know, as a whole. And also just looking at science with this, looking at the rainfalls that we have experienced. There's no denying that. And each time we've seen the flooding, it's been with these intensive rainfalls where we get dumped on in a very short period of time. And I think also just what we've seen just with Dorian, it's a constant reminder. 185 miles per hour, hurricane sitting over region for 40 hours. I mean, that could easily be us as well. So we have to take action. We understand it as an entire system, but also be more responsible to the system, freeing it from trash and debris. And the trash and debris that we're finding has been put there by our own people. And that has to stop.
Amanda Roberts, Box 8.
Just the last flooding event, we saw a lot of rainwater buildup in the CBD, and I know it was mentioned that we were going to start focusing on that area. We mentioned and talked about a whole lot of projects. Is there going to be a timeline? Are we attacking all of these at the same time, or are we starting to maybe focus our efforts in the CBD area right now?
We're focusing everywhere, just as you heard from the Sewerage and Water Board, the assessments that are going on right now, you know, in the CBD. So we're taking this very seriously. We're learning literally from every rain event, but there's no denying, again, the rainfall in a short period of time and how we're holding that water.
Any other questions?
Green infrastructure speaks to that, being able to hold that water. We need to do more of it, and we're working towards it.
I want to follow up with Mr. Sankoban about the Lafitte Canal. Did you say that there's so far been 500 tons scooped out of there, but there's still 20,000 tons more to go?
Yes, we quantified 20,500 tons
In that one canal?
in that 2.57 miles worth of canal, yes.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Okay. Well, thank you all, you know, very much for your time and really your listening ear. We hope that we have been able to answer and educate you all and the public, of course. That's really the overall intent. We have work to do. We need resources to do it, but the resources that we have, we're going to make good on our efforts of improving infrastructure throughout the city of New Orleans. I just ask for patience and also ask for the public to step up as it relates to its role and responsibility. We will soon, in terms of enforcement, we're going to be very aggressive as it relates to it. The litter abatement is a real thing. Dumping in the city will end, has to, because we can no longer go forward with allowing trash and debris to clog the drains that we do have. So we have to do better with what we have. And so there's a personal responsibility there. Any final closing remarks, anything I needed to mention or get straight? Okay. Thank you all so much again.